Awesome. Well, thank you all for having me here. It's nice to see all your happy faces. It's a good day, it seems like, with this group, so that's awesome. My name is Jess Nixon. I am a part of the development team at La Casa de las Madres. I've been there for about 2 years now. I worked in a couple of different domestic violence nonprofits. Moved to the Bay Area about 2 years ago and was lucky enough to start at La Casa right away. So I've got a 15 or so minute presentation giving some background on La Casa, what we do, a little bit of a high level domestic violence 101, and then ways to support survivors and engage in the work that we're doing. This is a small group, and so if you want to ask questions throughout, that's totally awesome. If not, I can answer questions at the end, and I'll do my best to give a good response. If I don't have the response, I will guide you to someone who does. But yeah, so I will share my screen.
Just a quick comment, Jess. Full disclosure, were you aware that Kathy Black was a longtime member of this club?
Yes, I'm very aware. She pointed out a leaf that's somewhere around Lake Merritt that had something to do with the Rotary group. Yes, she was very excited about that.
Yeah. For our centennial, we had a display at the Lake Chalet, and Kathy has a leaf out there. So
yeah.
Let her know that there's a box here available for her to climb into any day now.
I will let her know that. I think she's currently at a board meeting for La Casa, so she's pretty busy, as you can imagine, but I will let her know.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, let me share. Okay, so La Casa de las Madres was founded in 1976. So they was a group of women in the mission in San Francisco who realized that there wasn't support systems available for survivors of domestic violence. Along with one of the women had just recently lost their mother to a fatal domestic violence incident. So they created the first shelter for survivors, specifically for survivors of domestic violence in San Francisco. And I am told it was actually the second in the entire nation. So La Casa really has been at the forefront of this work since the very beginning of what is known as the battered women's movement. And we're all, so grateful to be able to still be here and supporting survivors and in our community. So the mission of La Casa is to respond to calls for help from survivors of domestic violence of all ages, 24/7, 365. We are always available to respond to calls. We work to give tools to transform lives, educate the community, and redefine public perceptions about domestic violence. So a couple prongs of our mission, but our core is really to be able to respond and support survivors 24/7. What do we do? So our services can kind of be broken down into 4 main categories. We have our crisis services. So 24/7 crisis line. This is a bilingual line. We always have someone able to respond in English and Spanish. We also have a third party that we work with where we can accommodate for many different languages if folks call and they need support. We have our text line. So this is a great opportunity to kind of lower the barrier for folks to reach out and connect. A call can be really intimidating. So giving folks the opportunity to text has been really helpful, especially for younger folks experiencing unhealthy relationships. It's been a great opportunity to connect in that kind of first step. We have our emergency shelter. So continuing on with how La Casa was started, giving folks the support and the time they need to be able to plan for what that next safe step is. Has been really critical in supporting our community. Support services. So our drop-in center is located in the Tenderloin Civic Center-ish on the edge. So that's where we are doing all of our counseling, our advocacy, teen program. So we are in the SF Unified School District, connecting to young folks, talking about healthy relationships early on. We have our support groups. Some of these women have been meeting together for over 20 years. So really tight-knit group of women supporting each other through their experiences of domestic violence. Training. So we truly believe that domestic violence is a community problem, which requires a community solution. So we work with our counselors, law enforcement, housing providers, making sure they have the tools and the resources they need to really support survivors they might come in contact with in their day-to-day jobs. And then outreach and education, so opportunities like this where we can connect with our corporate community partners, give you some background on what La Casa does, give you the tools that if you needed to share with a loved one or if you yourself ever needed to reach out to know that we're here, and other organizations like us are available to support folks. So that's kind of a very high level of what we do. We are focused in San Francisco, but we do connect with survivors across the Bay Area in California. So La Casa has responded to COVID-19 in a couple of different ways. Pretty immediately, our emergency shelter had to change. A lot of the spaces are kind of communal living. So we kind of structured into a new pod-based model. So all individuals or families have one bathroom. So they're not sharing with anyone else. All of our communal spaces, unfortunately, are kind of closed down. They're doing rotations for meals, just really taking every safety precaution to make sure that we keep everyone healthy and safe, staff, volunteers, and our residents. And this has been very successful. You know, we're happy to report that we haven't had any widespread issues. It's been a really safe time for most folks in our shelter. Generally, we have a 90-day kind of limit on folks being in shelter. So making sure that we're able to give them all the tools that they need during that time, and make sure that they have a next safe step to go to. COVID-19 kind of flipped that upside down. And so we've had folks staying with us for very extended periods of time because there really isn't as much resources right now available, especially for housing for folks outside of shelter. So it's been kind of a shift in our model, but able to support folks to the fullest extent that we can. Our 24/7 crisis and support line. So you might have probably seen a lot of articles saying that domestic violence is on an uptick during shelter in place and during the pandemic. While we haven't necessarily seen a number of calls increase, we definitely have seen the intensity increase. So unfortunately, we recognize that survivors are often sheltering in place with their abuser, working from home, children at home. So all of these different variables really affecting a relationship that might have been unhealthy or abusive before the pandemic, kind of escalating and increasing that violence now. Our tech support line has seen a huge uptick in folks reaching out. So similarly, folks are sheltering in place with their abuser. The text line has offered people another way to reach out. And so that's been really critical in our response. I think it was the last quarter, we saw a 300% increase in folks reaching out to our text line compared to 2019. So it has really been a critical way that we can connect with people. And we've brought in volunteers to make sure we can fill in that gap, have people, again, supporting 24/7, able to respond. Our permanent housing has shifted a little bit. So the way this works is we have case managers at 2 SROs in the Tenderloin, where we're focusing on supporting women who've experienced domestic violence or partner violence. So making sure that they had all of the resources that they need. So at the beginning of shelter in place, many of their supports were kind of shut down. And so being able to provide food boxes, cleaning supplies, sanitizing supplies. So all the things that they might not have access to, we've been able to provide and support them through this. And that's about 150 women we're supporting in the Tenderloin. And then our drop-in counseling center. So our one public space, we've had a slow, safe reopen. We're having folks drop in, but often we're creating schedules and meeting times. So instead of folks just being able to connect with their advocates on the phone, we're now able to do it in person. So that's been a shift in the last couple of months. And the survivors that we're supporting are so grateful to be able to come in and have a little bit more personal contact with their advocates and counselors. So that's been a really huge shift in what we're able to do. I guess good pause point. I've said a lot. Is there any questions before I kind of jump into DV 101?
Well, yeah, I have a question. So what happens when you get a text? What is your course of action? To intervene, to sequester, to call police authorities? How do you action that and protect them?
Yeah, so a text specifically is a little different than a call. And so because we don't want the text records to be subpoenaed, we are our first step is getting them on the crisis line and figuring out a safe way to get them to call in or to get them to our drop-in center or shelter. So that's really that first step, is to make contact either over phone or in person. This has looked a little differently, safety protocols, but meeting that person where they're at, maybe not at their homes, but meeting in a safe location has also been an opportunity to kind of remove them from that situation. Around that, La Casa really believes in an empowerment-based model. So we're never going to tell a survivor what to do. We're never going to tell a survivor that they should leave an abuser. We really, truly believe that they have the best interest and they know what's in the best interest of themselves. Obviously, if there's imminent violence or harm that we know is going to occur, we will take action. But we do believe in that empowerment-based model and providing them the tools they need to make those decisions for themselves.
Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Forgot I entered this slide. So this is extra. In 2020, we've still been able to connect with over 20,000 community members. Even through the pandemic, we've had over 3,700 survivors that have received support services, either counseling, therapy, emergency shelter. We've been able to support over 5,000 folks on our crisis support lines. That includes our phone lines and text lines. And then still really stayed true to our mission of educating our community. So we've reached over 4,000 people through educational workshops, making sure that this is still a conversation that's being had and a conversation that's even more critically important right now.
How do you?
Oh, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
How do you deal with someone who's undergoing current domestic violence? How do you separate her from that situation?
So a couple different ways. If it's a situation where they would like shelter and we have space, we will bring them into shelter. That's an intake process that generally would occur at our drop-in center, but with COVID, we've done a lot of those intakes over the phone. There's safety protocols, obviously, to keep folks isolated once they get to shelter, to keep everyone safe. So that's one option. We also work with local motels to house folks and separate them if shelter's not available or if shelter's not the option they want. Maybe it's just that they want a 24-hour period to kind of get on their feet and figure out what that next safe step is. We're going to give them that space and that opportunity to do that. So those are really like the two options that we kind of have to immediately separate someone from an abusive situation. Okay, so I guess why domestic violence? Why is this so important that La Casa and other organizations like us are doing this work? So 1 in 9 men and 1 in 4 women report experiencing some sort of sexual violence, stalking, or intimate partner by an intimate partner at some point in their lifetime. So we know that this is just the reported statistic. The DOJ estimates that this could be up to 40% higher. So this is a huge problem that's affecting a giant portion of our population. And like I said before, we really do believe that this is a community problem. And so having these conversations, being able to support survivors in our own networks is so important.
Have you taken a position, has Casa De Las Madres taken a position about taking police funding away and
I missed,
one of the areas is domestic violence that has been focused upon. That's why I asked.
I missed the middle piece, I think, taking funding away from
the police. They call it defunding the police. It's actually reducing funding of the police and having social workers and others, especially in domestic violence cases. I wondered if La Casa De Las Madres has taken a position on that.
Definitely. So I believe I might be getting this wrong. I believe it was the Crisis Act that we were huge supporters of. So that is shifting funding to nonprofits, to social workers to be able to respond to domestic violence incidents instead of the police in certain situations. And so, we really acknowledge that many of the folks that we work with have very intense relationships with the police. And so we always, as advocates, are acting as a buffer between them and the legal system, whether that's with the police or working through the legal process in courts. So we're really always acting as a buffer and an advocate for folks through those systems. But definitely we've supported shifting of funding and acknowledge that one of our advocates would be a great person to be the first person a survivor sees if 911 is called for domestic violence. So yeah, great question.
Do you know anything about what happened just now in Oakland? The 2 substitute agencies withdrew, so they don't have anybody to
No, I haven't heard about that. No.
replace the police. That just happened like last week.
I did have a question too.
Yeah.
I know it said, I think 1 in 9 men and 1 in 4 women, but are you going to share stats in regards to how that breaks down by demographic? I mean,
I have a couple stats. I think
if we're gonna get
a
there,
little later on, we can go back. So this is a little bit, it's not all inclusive. So this slide really is to show that domestic violence affects all populations, all communities. It does not discriminate. LGBTQ folks are experiencing domestic violence at similar or increased rates, especially for trans folks. We recognize that domestic violence is often a primary cause of homelessness. So this 50% of US cities surveyed reports that, and that is true to our population when we're reporting on the Bay Area. And so folks are really disclosing that one of the main reasons is because they've been experiencing domestic violence, and not only before homelessness, but unfortunately during. Partner violence is a huge problem for folks who are homeless. And other vulnerable populations. So 1 in 3 people living with disabilities has experienced domestic violence. So really focusing on that this impacts everyone on so many different levels is hugely important. Gonna go back a little bit. Just to kind of get a baseline of how we define domestic violence. So domestic violence is a series of behaviors that is used by an individual to exert power and control over their intimate partner or former partner. So it's really about that power and control that we always go back to. This isn't a one-off event. This isn't someone just getting mad about a certain situation. This truly is a pattern of conduct that's establishing this power and control in a relationship and keeping someone in an unsafe situation. So this power and control wheel has been used for many years. It was created by actually interviewing abusers themselves and them explaining how they controlled their partners. So things like emotional abuse, minimizing, denying, blaming, keeping a survivor to kind of question what they know and what's true in their situation, using privilege. So that could look like a lot of different things. Using an immigration status, unfortunately, to keep someone in an unhealthy relationship for fear of being outed. Using children, that's often a tactic that folks are going to use to keep someone in an unhealthy relationship. Economic or financial abuse. So that's seen in 90% of domestic violence cases. And that can look like a lot of different ways as well. So ruining credit, making an allowance for a loved one, vice versa, forcing someone to work and then the abuser spending all of the money, not allowing them to have access to the money that they've earned. So a lot of different ways that domestic violence can look outside of just that physical violence. So kind of, I overviewed on this slide, but did you have any questions on the populations that are affected? Like I said, it does affect everyone, but I might be able to answer some specifics.
Well, we were, I'm sorry. We were kind of, my husband and I were talking and we were trying to determine, because we were watching, we started watching a documentary yesterday, the 13th on Netflix, and that's specifically on incarceration, but just, it disproportionately affects Black and Brown communities, and just, as we were talking, I was like, I'm pretty sure like domestic violence does also seem to affect those communities a lot in higher rates, but I mean, I had no evidence to back that up. And so I was like, well, maybe we can, figure that out today.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And yes, it does definitely affect those populations at a higher rate. I know that specifically for folks in the criminal justice system, they, gosh, experience domestic violence. I think it's 70% higher at a higher rate than other folks. And so it's just kind of this different layers of people's experience that have kind of led to them to these relationships, unfortunately. I don't have any stats past that in my brain. I'm sure I could pull some resources for you and share them tomorrow. I can connect with our community ed manager and see what I can gather. But yes, you know, it definitely affects all populations on different levels for sometimes for different reasons.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, on a related note, obviously this is all US based statistics. Do you have any statistics on a worldwide basis, what the level of abuse is that occurs? I'm wondering how much is cultural. And the reason why I asked that question, I'm reading this book on the history of Native Americans in the US, and apparently Native American cultures did not discipline their children. That only came through westernization of Native Americans.
That's a really good question. And speaking to the culture aspects of it, you know, there are definitely cultures who, while the rate of domestic violence is probably very similar to what we see in the US, it's not reported at nearly the same rate. And so it's kind of an unspoken thing that is occurring in many relationships, and something that's supported by the community, not supported in the sense that they're like, you know, supporting it happening, but not intervening or giving the survivors the support that someone would need to be able to disclose that. So that kind of leads me into this next slide of why folks are staying in unsafe relationships. So it can be really difficult, you know, looking in on someone who's close to you, a coworker, a friend, or a family member who you can identify as in an unhealthy relationship, maybe a violent relationship. There's so many variables that are affecting folks, and really all of them are valid, right? From that empowerment-based model, we do believe that survivors know what's best for them, and there's so many reasons why someone might stay. For fear is a huge reason that someone might stay, and we know that at the moment that a survivor decides to leave an abusive relationship, that's the most unsafe that they will be in this cycle of domestic violence. That is the most likely time period that it will be a fatal domestic violence incident. And so fear is valid. It might be safer for a survivor to stay in that moment than leaving. Guilt, embarrassment. We do live in a society where domestic violence and partner violence is often stigmatized. So not wanting to out yourself to your community and your peers for fear of people not believing you, or people not understanding, you know, why they stay for so long. Why did they, you know, allow themselves to get into a relationship like this? I'm sorry, what was that?
What percent of the women you see go back to what you consider an unsafe relationship?
I know it's over 50% nationally. I don't have a stat specific for La Casa, but yes, we definitely see abusers going back to, survivors going back to their abusers.
And when they go back, is it worse? I mean, do they
so often this
for having come to you sometimes?
Oh, I think I missed that middle piece again. I'm sorry, you're cutting in and out.
I said, do they suffer sometimes for having come to you for help?
Yes, I mean, that can definitely be a response. And that's why we really truly try to give all of the power to the survivor in making that decision, because they've been experiencing this violence, they've been in this relationship, so they have a better understanding of what might be the repercussions of leaving if they're not going to leave permanently. So I know that during the pandemic and during shelter in place, folks really are going back to their abusers at higher rates. And most of those reasons that are being reported are financial reasons. And so they just don't have the means, and there aren't enough support systems out there for folks to have housing. And so they're basically forced to go back to their abusers. So there's all of these reasons, especially during the pandemic, that's been really difficult for survivors to get safety.
Does your service include anything where they can go back and try to help their partner to change his ways?
That's not something that we do, but we have partnered with, oh, I'm blanking. There is a program specifically with abusers who've been convicted. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm so blanking on this
We can share it.
program.
Right?
Yeah, I can share it later. But they do work with abusers, first identifying that they were abusing their partners. And there is a curriculum, especially in San Francisco, there's a specific curriculum for them. So we don't do that work, but it is happening. Okay, so I guess with all that being said, how can we all just support survivors in our day-to-day lives? So that first piece is really just asking, checking in on loved ones and coworkers if you notice things are off, checking in if someone's okay, checking in on someone's relationship if you know that there's been struggles in the past. Often this is just the opportunity that someone might need to disclose that they're experiencing violence and might need help. With that, believing and listening survivors, not questioning their experience, validating their experience, not questioning why they're staying in a relationship, really validating what they share with you and making sure that they know that whatever they choose to do, that you are there to support them. So really, again, from that empowerment-based model of making sure that they know whatever their next step is, you're going to be there to support them. And then knowing and sharing resources. So I do like to ask folks right now to add La Casa's crisis line to your phone. I think it's a great thing to have. I can also send it out and you can share it in an email, but it's at the bottom of the screen right now. It's a great thing to have to just be able to share if you're in a situation where all of a sudden a friend or a loved one discloses that they're in an unsafe situation, that you can immediately provide this to them. And then getting involved with organizations like La Casa. So there's many organizations like La Casa outside of San Francisco that are doing this work, many different types of ways to engage. So how can you get involved specifically with La Casa? So easiest way, if you have social media, follow us on social media. We try to stay very up to date on all of our education, giving updates on all of our different programs, events, different virtual events that we might be doing with the public. So that's a great way to kind of stay connected and learn about what's happening in our work. Similarly, our e-newsletter, you can sign up on our website, or I can send out a link as well. It's a great way. It's monthly, again, program updates, event updates, other ways to engage and support the work that's happening. Quarterly and annual events look very different right now. We're definitely not doing our in-person events like we have done in the past, which have been very, very fun ways to kind of engage the community through conversations and panels. I'll jump down to the support section. We have an annual fundraising event called our Red Hot Party. This is an amazing night where the community members gather. There's different political leaders, advocates, activists, community members just wanting to learn more about domestic violence. So if you're interested in corporate sponsorship or just volunteering and learning more about that event, we have saved the date for the first Thursday in October. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so that's kind of how we kick off the month. We're hopeful that this is in person, but it might be virtual. But either way, it's a good event. We usually have a keynote speaker that can really speak to nationally or locally kind of what's happening and what's in the works in the DV movement. Also, if you're interested in donating in an individual donation, every little bit helps, helps us be able to support survivors and make sure that we're able to kind of pivot and change as their needs are changing, especially during these pandemic times. Every $100 really does provide that full day and night of safety, 3 warm meals, snacks, the support that they need, and a warm place to stay for a mother and child. So it really is powerful how much small donations can do. And if you're interested in getting even more involved, we do have direct and indirect opportunities. So if you're interested in working with survivors specifically, we have a 40-hour training that will be launching again in the spring. So if you're interested in that, you can definitely reach out to me or to our community education person at comed@lacasa.org. Or if you have other talents that you want to share, we have many opportunities to help with social media or graphic design or maybe volunteering at events. So lots of opportunities to engage if you're interested. Well, that is all I have prepared, but I'd love to answer any questions. Conversation is so fun.
I may have missed this, but does the organization just focus strictly within the bounds of the city of San Francisco?
So our target population is San Francisco, but we definitely, especially with shelter, will have folks come from outside of the Bay Area. Our hotline is toll-free for the state of California. So we are supporting folks for the entire state. I did write this down because I wanted to make sure I could share it. The partner organization that we work with in Oakland is usually a safe place. I believe their website is asafeplace.org. So that's the closest partner we have in Oakland.
So for people that reach out to you from other places in the state, you just find other local organizations that are close to them to be able to help?
Generally, and it's really individual to the survivor. Sometimes the survivor doesn't need to leave their city and they can find their local resource. Sometimes they do, and that's when La Casa or another Bay Area location might be the best option for them, if they need to actually remove themselves from their community.
So given the nature of privacy, obviously in this, how can a volunteer organization like our club participate both now in the virtual space and how can we do volunteering? We used to do around the holidays is provide materials to give out to the mothers and we've done that in the past. But what are the range of possibilities?
Yeah, no, definitely. Our adoptive family program is a great option. I think I already added your email, Brandy, to the list because I know you reached out and we'd already met our needs for the year. But the way that we've kind of maybe shifted that program in recent years is we do a more traditional wish list format for folks that are staying with us in shelter. And then we do a more specific gift box where we're supporting over 400 survivors often with a nice gift set, gift card for their holiday meal, and then hopefully a gift card for any holiday shopping they might have. So that's a great way to support. It's breaking down to about $70 a box. And so it's kind of a fun way to support. When things can be in person, folks get very creative and do a lot of fun wrapping, and it's kind of, can be more of a involvement. This year it was less fun. People were just shipping items to La Casa, which was great. We were still able to support over 300 people, but it can be more fun when we can be in person again. Similarly, we used to do toiletry kits. So if you're interested in doing toiletry kits, we can put together those. That's again more fun when we can be together. We are working on, and I can send you more information once it's a little bit more finalized, but we are working on a pass it on campaign. So the idea behind this is that domestic violence really thrives in silence. And so we want to create a physical postcard and also a digital postcard of 3 impact ways to reach out to someone. So sending an email with a digital postcard, or maybe mailing a print postcard with 3 ways that someone can support La Casa survivors and kind of engage with the community. So we're kind of workshopping that right now, but it's something that we want to roll out, especially for groups like yours.
Got it. Well, 2 things. One, fun wrapping is Brandy's middle name. That speaks to Brandy in all regards. And
actually, Armando.
Is Armando
That's
there?
awesome.
The wrapping, surprisingly. So
I love it.
But the second point is, how many of these survivors are with kids? In other words, they've extracted themselves, and what's done for the children in that environment?
It's a really great question.
And when I ask that, I mean not only in your program, but also that we could support in a volunteer way, like you described for the survivors themselves.
That's a really great question. So we see, I can give us shelter statistics. So often it's 50% adults and 50% children. We do have individuals that are staying in our shelter that don't have children, but it really is about 50-50, the folks that we're supporting in shelter. Specifically for kiddos and supporting them through volunteer opportunities, that gets a little more complicated. We have done toy drives around the holidays, so if that's something you're interested in, we definitely would love to chat about what that could look like. We don't support as many children outside of shelter, and so usually it's really kind of focused within the shelter. If kids do need the counseling support, we're not a children's counseling agency, and so we do have partners who will support them outside of what we can do. But yeah, I'm thinking the toy drive is kind of the biggest piece that we do around the holidays. They're around smaller holidays. We do some activity kits. I'm trying to think what we most recently did. Halloween, we often will do some sort of Halloween party. So we welcome Halloween costume donations. So if you're interested in sponsoring shelter kids, we can give you sizes and their preferences, and that's a fun way to engage as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I had a question related to kids. Is there a different, I imagine is there a different like process when there's potential violence that has been done? Like when a child comes in, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's definitely a different process. I am not super familiar with, as advocates, what we are required to do, but I do know that, when violence has occurred to children and we can prove that we will be reporting out. Often, unfortunately, that's kind of hidden from our advocates if children are experiencing that violence. But we do everything we can to take that next step if this is occurring, especially if we know that the survivor is potentially going to go back to their abuser. That becomes a much more difficult situation.
For your Red Hot party, several years ago, there were a couple of us who volunteered on the day of to like come in and help set up and decorate and get the whole thing. So hopefully if come October, you get to have one in person.
Yes.
Is that something that people would be able to come in and help?
Definitely. And so, yeah, the big pieces around that is we try to do as much in-house as we can. So all of the fundraising dollars are supporting services. So the decorating at the beginning, the catering often falls onto volunteers. And so if that's something you're interested in, I would love to add you to our list to reach out to once we have been able to finalize if it is an in-person event. Yeah. And is that first Thursday of October, if you want to mark your calendars just in case. It's a fun event. It's really fun. It was sad that we weren't able to do it this past year.
No, for sure.
Perfect. That's kind of our jam.
I love it. Well, I'll just add you to the list. Don't even need to tell me. I'll do that right away.
Yeah. We're subscribed. Any other questions from our group? I know we're a very curious crew.
This is great. Usually I don't get as much engagement, so thank you. And if any of my answers didn't suffice, please let me know and I can connect you to someone who can give you a little more detailed. I can connect you to some program staff too.
How under normal circumstances, how large is the shelter? How many people can?
Yeah, so normal circumstances, we have 35 beds. And so that's half of the beds specific for survivors of domestic violence in San Francisco. So we are the largest shelter for survivors of domestic violence. Right now, we're sitting at about 25 with the restructuring into the pods. So we've definitely been utilizing our motel partners quite a bit more.
Wow. That's amazing. The 35 is the largest. in the city of San Francisco.
It is, yes, it is pretty wild. I came from Oregon previously and was working at a domestic violence shelter, and we had 35 beds in a very small town. And so it is very interesting. I think often folks are experiencing homelessness. There are more shelters available, but for folks who've experiencing domestic violence, it is really critical that they have advocates who are trained in what they've experienced. So I think, you know, as La Casa continues to grow, expanding our beds is a top priority.
Is the seemingly small number of beds, at least to me, or maybe Jolene as well, is that in part because of funding, or is it like there's a lot of organizations that do similar work, and so
Just
the
the cost
overall
of real
number of
estate.
beds?
All of what you just said is true. I think, you know, there are a lot of programs supporting folks. Real estate is definitely one of them. The other piece of it is that we are a different model than most shelters. And so we are more of a long-term solution, long-term being in general 90 days. And so it's just a different model. You can't have huge amounts of people in that type of community. But expanding to be able to have more buildings with more beds is, you know, is the future, hopefully.
Other questions? Oh, geez. We wanted to show our thanks, Jess, for coming and for, you know, spending your evening with us and talking about La Casa.
Yeah.
And to show our thanks, we wanted to donate some vaccines in your name to end polio.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and so, you know, we have some new guests, but also for those of you on YouTube who might not know, Rotary is committed to ending polio now. And just last year, polio was eradicated in Africa, and now the virus is only endemic in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And so we're really close, and your time and conversation is contributing to that effort. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. That's wonderful.
Yeah. And so our social info for us to keep in touch. But, you know, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk. I'm newer to our club, and there's a couple of us that are newer. So it's nice to kind of hear more about La Casa and how our club had previously participated and what it could look like in the future. So I really appreciate that.
Definitely. Well, thank you for the time and thank you for listening. You've been awesome.
Rotary.